How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I really enjoyed your work. I love a good mystery, and this is a good
No.
mystery multiplied, which is always a lot of fun. Before we get into your work on the series, I was curious if you remember what led you to a career in acting.
Oh, what a great question. Honestly, it's the only thing I remember ever really wanting to do. And I guess that stemmed from doing plays when I was younger. I wrote a lot of stories and I had two little brothers that used to like dress up and make, I don't know, choreographed dances and do that kind of thing with me. I think probably just storytelling and pretending. Um, yeah, there was no like great epiphany moment, but it was just always something that I wanted to do.
That being a good storyteller and wanting to tell them is good enough, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're good at that.
Yeah. Or you want to learn how to be better, I guess, as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And what made you want to be part of this series?
Because I mean, talking about storytelling, I think Brit and Zal have this way of creating a world that is so rich, both fantastically and like breaking the boundaries of what you think would be possible in terms of worlds that I know they've everyone loves that they've what they did with that and the OA, like just yeah, breaking all those boundaries of what would uh be thought of as possible in creative worlds. And then with this, I guess they did it with tech and AI. And but they have this very strong human element at the center of all their stories, which is really tender and really Britt and I were talking about it earlier today about this sense of earnestness that um it really appreciates and holds close. And I think that that's a rare thing these days. And I think I really enjoyed that element of it, those two different things, to be able to tell a really beautiful human story, but in context of this crazy sort of retreat and this uh, sort of warning tale about AI and technology as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how many different things are actually going on at the same time. And in different, very human and a very, robotic or computer, whatever you want to consider AI, and also, multiple mysteries and multiple characters who we're learning about slowly as little as, little bit by little bit is revealed. So it's, you know, with this narrative that kind of burns at both ends and in the middle, what was production like? Is it very challenging to kind of go
Yeah,
between all those different elements?
it was wild because my character Darby's in every single frame, and I think it was a real sort of lesson in hubris for an actor to sort of read the script. And initially I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I'm on every single page. This is great. And then, the practicality of shooting and being in every single frame is insane for the best part of a year. And it takes its toll in a very real way. And so it was a masterclass in learning how to use stamina in your work. And I think I was able to draw on my experience in theatre for that, which is also incredibly physically demanding. Um, but it was helped by the fact that we sort of shot in Iceland to begin with, which was an incredible environment and is such a strong character in itself, that environment in the show. Um, and that was fun. And then we did worked on stages in New Jersey for about 5 months, which was its own challenge. And then we had these last 2 weeks in Utah with doing the Darby and Bill storyline, the flashbacks, and that was such a gift. It was exactly as it sort of comes across in the series. It was hazy and golden, and we were all so grateful to be out of stages and into nature, and that nature, which is majestic and sort of otherworldly.
That reminds me, I'm in New Jersey. I'm in Jersey City. Where were you
Was
shooting?
it? I honestly couldn't tell you, but it wasn't that far through the tunnel. It was like 10 minutes the other side.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Somewhere right around in my backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
Um,
interesting.
yeah.
And how was it portraying the same character, but two different times and two different, so many different experiences between, the version, well, actually, there's several different versions. There's the one on the compound or whatever they call it, the pre early build days, and then the post days. So what is it like playing three different variations of the same character who's experienced so many different things. Like, how do you prep for that?
It was actually amazing. I found that the two different Darby and those two different stages, those two different versions of her, if you will, they sort of inform each other. Present Darby has a lot to learn from the person she was in that moment with Bill. She hasn't allowed herself to properly process what happened then, and the fact that she is partly responsible for um, why Bill left her, because she wasn't able to be open and available to him emotionally like he needed to be. And because of that, she has to access a vulnerability in the present tense to sort of um, be able to find out um, who the murderer is. And it's a kind of a really original idea that Britons are working with, this idea of a detective, especially like a female detective, who has to become vulnerable in order to solve a mystery, not become hardened. And I think that's quite rare to see on screen, and they really did that. They portrayed that exceptionally well in their writing, and it was really fun to work with. And I think, yeah, it was just an interesting thing to think about, how our past informs our present, but then like vice versa as well. Zal and I talked a lot in the flashbacks, shooting the flashback scenes, about how you know, to imbue it with a sense that Darby, there's a part of Darby that knows that she's going to lose Bill at some point, and playing that in, and those seeds of sort of the preciousness of that time that they have together in that moment, which was fun to work with.
And their chemistry, Darby and Bill's, is so unique. What do you think they see in each other? Why are they drawn, and you know,
It's a great
how does
question.
that happen?
I think they both found this way of connecting with people, which is this like community that is online. And um yeah, this sort of shared language that they very much have, which is through the computer. But then I think that it's also sort of a shared mission, that they don't want to leave anyone behind. And I think they're both searching for meaning in a world that is sort of quickly losing its meaning, and where technology is ultimately taking over and replacing human life in many ways. I think that they are trying to not leave any person behind, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think it's like they have a very much like a shared language, shared brain, which forms a really deep connection.
Yeah, it's like one of those, very odd passings, kind of like by chance that they meet, and then they have this like interwoven connections, and things that drive them, and things that
Yeah.
and then their attraction to each other, which is also another kind of facet of their relationship.
Yeah.
And what drives Darby? You said kind of that mission, but does what drive her change from the beginning of the series to the end?
It's a great question. I think initially I think initially what drives her is, she's grown up in working with her dad in the morgue. She's confronted by death the whole time, and she sees so much injustice in the way that women are left unaccounted for, and the care is not there in the justice system. There are so many cold cases, and so many women left behind, and so many of the girls that she encounters as Jane Does that she finds with her father are her age. And I think it sort of must make you quite numb to that in a terrifying way, but also angry. And I think she has this sense of almost like a prophecy sort of thing. Like she feels like it's her job. Who else has this experience? Who else has been able to see this, to know that there is something deeply wrong? And yet she doesn't trust the system. So she's like, I'm going to try and do this on my own. And that's how I think she finds Bill and forges that connection with him. So I think there's that. I think it's justice. She feels like she can relate to these women who have died and finish their stories for them. And
We need more of that in this world. We need more of
you
that
have that in
driven
the
by
world.
for justice and for good.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly. And I think you see that in the way that Darby and Bill sort of name the dead every time they come across them. And I remember when I read that in the script initially, I was like, huh, I wonder. Like it was an interesting beat to play, and I don't think I fully understood it until I went back to the script and then working on it more with Brit and Zala. I was like, no, this is a beautiful ritual. I think I didn't understand the ritualistic element of what they were doing
mhm,
by voicing these names that had been forgotten, and it was such a beautiful, really sort of moving scene to do. And I think all of these things, that's very much Darby's past, but I think that also plays into the present of almost a sense of duty. I think in the present, she's sort of like, Bill has died, and that brings everything from the past in to confront her in the present. And then she's in this hotel and she looks around at these people and she feels like she's the only one. It's fallen on her shoulders to fulfill this. Yeah.
I remember feeling the same way when they're doing the names in the first episode. I was like, what's going on here? And then by the I think
Yeah.
it's the finale, when it happens again, you're like, oh, it totally lands and it makes so
It
much more
lands.
sense.
We interestingly, when we were shooting that, we shot all of the Darby and Bill stuff at the end in Utah, but the only thing we shot quite like literally one of our first days in the stages in New Jersey were was that scene where they named the dead. And it was so isolated. And even though I'd gone through the script a million times and I thought I had a grasp on it, saying these women's names in that scene, I was like, I don't know if I'm like doing this justice. I don't know if I completely understand it yet. Um, and then of course, yeah, by the end, I really did. And it's clever that they place that there so that then the audience sort of can join the dots later on.
Mhm. I loved how that worked out. Like I love being in the dark, and then as long as you get a few answers or at least some connective tissue to get you to like build
Yeah.
your ideas, and this does a great job keeping you in the dark and revealing a little corner, a flash of light at a time. Like, oh wait, I've got a clue. I've got a sense of where we're going.
Yeah.
You famously played a very different type of character in The Crown
Mhm.
as Princess Di, and I'm wondering how preparing for this role as Darby, a character that you have more freedom. How did it differ from your Princess Di prep?
It was really different, and it was a challenge because even after, obviously, Diana had a lot of research and so like almost a overwhelming amount of resources to draw from. And then I did Chatterley and My Policeman. Those were both based on books, so I had that to draw from. And then I encountered Darby, and I just had the scripts, and it was funny because I guess even when you get and you encounter an original work, um, if whether it's film or TV, normally the writers or directors will say, here are our list of references where it's a bit like this and your character's slightly like this. And let me just, sorry, let me turn this off. I've got it. Don't worry.
All right.
And yeah, there's that kind of, you can draw on those references. But for Murder at the End of the World, they sort of said the opposite and said, okay, this is what we want it not to be like. Because basically they were creating something really original in Darby, this sort of Gen Z amateur sleuth who is very driven, but sort of feeling her way through these situations. She's working from instinct. You're finding out stuff with her in real time. She has no real plan until it's right there. And so, yeah, they sort of gave me a lot of things like, we don't want it to be like this. We're trying to move away from this stereotype of this kind of detective and that kind of thing. So, really, to be honest, it fell on the scripts, which were luckily so rich that it really helped. And then also the accent work, because obviously it's an American accent for a long, long series. And I work with an incredible dialect coach called Charisse. And um, yeah, she and I worked extensively on forming Darby's voice and all those sort of facets of her physicality and how that informed her. And it was really like as soon as I got Darby's voice, then it sort of affected like my mannerisms, and yeah, that was really helpful.
It's amazing. I totally forgot while I was watching it, that you play these two different characters. Like I completely never once like was in my mind like, oh,
I'm
I've
so glad. That's the best news. That's the best news I could be. Yeah.
well, congratulations on. So
Anyway.
working with Brit is another thing that we have to touch upon. I mean, I find her intimidating. She's so smart and talented, and she left one world to take on a world she's more, a career she's more passionate about, and then coming up with these ideas, like with AI. As I'm watching this, I'm thinking, how did she know? Like, how, like now that these conversations are happening, but these conversations were not on most people's radar. Kind of terrifying, actually.
I think it is terrifying, and I think she and Zal have always had their finger on the pulse of that sort of world that is the underworld of stuff that's just appearing, just coming up. They have a lot of I used to knock around with a lot of sort of young Silicon Valley tech people like Moxie Marlinspike, who started the greatest name, I think, in the history of humankind. Moxie Marlinspike, who started Signal. He gave me a coding lesson when I signed on to Murder the End of the World, which I was terrible at, but it was a lot of fun. And I think they sort of in their early 20s were sort of surrounded by these people who were creating this sort of software and these new ways of communicating and the birth of the internet sort of thing. And not the birth of the internet, but like, birth of this new wave of tech and AI.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think it's also sort of fed from their sort of love of sci-fi and thinking about how different versions of our future will affect human relationships and the responsibility that we have to each other and our moral responsibility, which ultimately this series ends up being about, is like, how do you account for your moral responsibility when you're dealing with artificial intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
But apparently when they
It,
were writing this, all their friends in Silicon Valley were like, this is way too far out. Like this is not going to be relevant. Like this is real sci-fi. Like maybe you want to make it more relevant. And that was what 4 or 5 years ago. And now it's been what we deal with has been and gone. We're on to, I think we were
yeah,
shooting ChatGPT 3 came out, and yeah, it is crazy how fast it's progressing. And I think that in that way, the series also really serves as a warning.
yeah, and I like how it kind of touches upon other aspects of like the morality of it all, like the fact that someone talks, it's mining humanity. It's mining what we have said and done. This isn't thinking on its own. So, and kind of going along with the strikes earlier or later or earlier last year, and people saying, you can't just go hire a bot to replace us, and I think we're at these conversations are starting now, and just about every single industry is like, you know, how secure am I in this world? Like at what point am I just replaced by a prompt and a keyboard? So
Exactly. Yeah.
who expected, when I started a murder mystery, I didn't expect to get this lesson in
After
technology
that.
in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, well, that's Britain's are. They're always like leading it back to something sinister and really on the pulse of what society is dealing with. And you think, how did you know? What are you
Yeah,
channeling?
and
Yeah.
yeah, do you have like some kind of magic
Oracle.
genie that tells you
Yeah.
these answers?
Yeah.
If so, please don't ask too many questions.
They're just super
What's
smart.
your relationship? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying they're super smart. They're some of the smartest people I've met. It's wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be to put this out there. What is your relationship with technology? Are you like Darby at all?
No, I'm really not. I'm really not. I use it, I guess, practically. I wish I didn't use my phone as much as I do. It's so annoying. I think our dependency on technology is really terrifying. And the
Hmm.
way that, oh God, someone told me the other day that if you ask kids now to mime the phone, like if I was to say, ask you to like mime a phone, being on the phone, what would you do? I'd do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they've never had this. So they do that, which is terrifying. If you ask a kid, they do this because it's an iPhone, I guess. They've never had that,
Hmm.
which I think is so scary. And I think Bill touches upon that a bit in that scene where they're both in the desert, and he says, I think one day, now these days we look back at those pictures of everyone smoking in cinemas, and see the cloud of smoke and think, how did they do that? And now we're all on our phones and it's the same kind of drug. Um, but then it's interesting because I think he's so true. I think it's undeniably true. But then there's this other side to it, which is that what Darby says, where she's like, well, if it wasn't for the internet, we would have never met. And you think about how dispersed communities are now and families are through travel and
Hmm.
work and everything that we've got to contend with. And technology is our means of communication. So I don't know what the future is. I think there
I
needs,
was having that conversation today. I'm like, it's getting
yeah,
scary, like, because you can't take it away,
you can't.
but we become so dependent on it, and it's being used for so many things that it shouldn't be,
I
that
know
I'm like, yeah, you can't get the genie back in the bottle.
you can't, and you can't take it away. I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and we were like, okay, well, what if we didn't have? You can get one of those dumb phones. I think that's what they're called. But then
Hmm.
it's like you have your banking app. You can't freaking pay for anything without it being like, we're going to text you a code. And then like ordering food, getting on public transport, maps, anything. You can't, they've made it impossible for you to do anything without being hooked up to this thing. It's really scary.
Yeah, there's no wire there, but we're pretty much wired in at all times. Like, even just to go to someone's house, or to talk, to even call somebody. That was like the original. I don't know your number, because you don't need to know a number anymore. Excuse me. But now, just to go anywhere or to buy anything, you already know your series of steps you'll take, like, and what app you'll use. But it's not using your brain. It's all
It,
exterior processing power, I guess.
and I think also what it's doing to our attention spans is probably having
Hmm.
a greater effect on things than we could even imagine. Like I think about it with our industry and everything that's changing in terms of the landscape of streaming. And I know that people say that like, streamers have really taken over and that's massively affected cinema. And I think that that is true, but also I think that streamers are having such a great effect because their format of TV, which is predominantly what they put out, is digestible in the amount that we are now trained to consume these like reels and TikToks and whatever, even if you don't
Hmm.
have like an Instagram, it's all bite-sized bits of consumable information. And I think that streaming really caters to that in a way that cinema doesn't. And so that's scary as well, is that our attention spans are making us lose these bits of like culture. It's strange.
I
Yeah.
have to wrap up. Just two, well, one's like pretty much a yes or no, but do you think we'll see more of Darby?
I don't know. I would love to. Always think it's interesting that they never expanded on what happened to her mum. And I think that's kind of clever because it's this omnipresent cloud that hangs over the series, but also I feel like it kind of sets it up quite nicely. If they ever wanted to return to it, you could do a series about, Darby unraveling the mystery of her mum. That is not to say that that's happening, but just I feel like it could. Yeah.
Yeah. And yesterday, a big trailer dropped, the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer. It's got to be very exciting. Is there anything you can share about that? Even just your excitement?
Not yet. I'm too scared to say anything because I'm worried that Marvel will hunt me down. But I'm so excited for the world to see it. It's amazing. Yeah, it was
That's
such a lot to
fantastic.
work on. Yeah.
Well, based on everything else you've done, I can't wait to see that, and another film coming up that don't have time to get into it, but I look forward to all you do, and thank you
Thanks,
for your
Stephen.
time,
Thanks
and
so much.
have a great day.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.